Thank you. Those of you who have been with us from the morning, and I think we've had enough coffee that nobody has fallen asleep with the light rain that we're receiving right now. But, you know, things don't always work out the way you expect. And unfortunately, our president is not here to give some words about our national planning project. He is very excited about it. Unfortunately, he had to leave. As the Vice President said, he's doing well, and she has made the announcement for him in the opening remarks this morning. I did want to give you a bit of perspective on what we have been discussing, the President and I, in pursuing this project. We do have to also give a lot of appreciation to the Asian Development Bank, to Emma and her boss, and to Romel, who's in the room today. This is something that I've been asking support for. The national planning is a project that's identified in the President's transition report and in his platform, something that he's been trying to implement since the beginning of his administration. Something that I picked up and was able to solicit support from the Asian Development Bank. So we have to thank them for coming along for this exercise and providing us with the assistance that allowed me to recruit the consultant that's working with us now. He's in the back there enjoying people's company that might be involved in the project. So she's wearing a mask also. I noticed nobody's wearing a mask in the room. I think that's a good thing. Well, sorry, there are two people wearing a mask in the room. It's okay. We do have some variants going around, but we do need to make sure that we continue to stay safe so that we have an opportunity for our tourism industry to resume and not have that raise its head again, the pandemic. But the idea of the national planning in this particular project is not to say that we have not been planning. Often we do develop these comprehensive plans like the National Master Development Plan and the medium-term strategies, but often these plans, although broadly receive stakeholder engagement, are often difficult to implement because they're kind of created in isolation. So they end up being placed on the shelf. So we're hoping through this exercise is partly to bring all of those plans together, not to duplicate any of the work we've already done. We think that's more efficient, and we think that'll take advantage of a lot of the work that's already been done. And some of these plans are still relevant and probably implementable. So we expect that we'll be able to pull those plans together as part of what I'd like to call consolidating the planning effort with a bit more modern context in the planning exercise, a bit more stakeholder engagement with reflecting the current environment and the prospects that we've been hearing about throughout the day, and result in a plan that is very practical and implementable and that we use. I think that's the litmus test for success of this plan. So in the end, we will create a formal system of planning for the Republic. This planning system will be led by the Office of the President, as the Vice President had mentioned this morning, and it will be managed through the Ministry of Finance. And the reason why Ministry of Finance is so critical to this process is because of the budget. So when the rubber hits the road, it's typically through the budget process. We want to make sure that that process is efficient, that the priorities are reflected along with the other sector inputs, such as national infrastructure, and that those are communicated well to our other stakeholders, such as state governments and our other partners that will help us provide the funding or provide us the land access or other resource access that will make this plan achievable. So the key outcome of this exercise is a practical plan and a system to develop future plans. The plan will focus on national priorities, and I think there's often a debate on what the priority is, and it often is debated every year and not necessarily consistent in terms of the long-term priorities, which makes it difficult to plan on direction for government improvements. Once we have this high-level plan, we will focus on sectoral plans, and that will be the step that will probably happen in early next year. A consideration at that point will be made on how to integrate the planning systems, the various plans, with the budget. Also, I think very critical is a way to finance the implementation of the plan. As you've heard today, we are in a critical state, a critical point in our history, and have to consider, a lot of our funding will necessarily be financed through loans from our partners or through debt issuance by the Republic. We have an opportunity to receive additional grant support during this critical time, and I'm hoping that the people in the room will support that statement and encourage some of our bilateral partners to support that as well. We do have a lot of interest at this time, as you can tell by the military exercises being conducted in our country. Hopefully that'll provide some incentive for donors to provide grant support, not just for budgetary operations, but for a lot of the critical segments of our population that you were able to witness today. And although I don't really want to encourage giving money away during the symposium, it was nice to see that we were able to implement this critical project. And as the director said earlier, this is a pilot project, and if we're successful, it may lead to a long-term project to make sure that those most vulnerable parts of our population are not left behind in the process of pursuing economic prosperity. So we do hope to finish the planning exercise and have a workable plan come summer next year. I think this will also help with our partners in looking at the priorities that we're identifying and the justifications that go behind that, seeing how these fit in with the forecasts and outlook, the headwinds or tailwinds as they may be. So our next symposium, I think, will be focus a lot on this plan and how the different developments going forward are going to fit in, whether or not we have success in encouraging additional carriers to fly to our country, whether or not the Japanese become less conservative and start returning to our country, whether or not we're able to secure the additional tourism investment and other economic diversification projects such as the digital residency program expansion. And I'm looking at the IMF right now when I say the stablecoin project launch, which we're hoping to do on a pilot basis in the next few months. So if nobody has fallen asleep yet, I see the governor is just giving me a weird look. I'm open to answer any questions at this point, even though we're very early in the stages of launching this plan. Minister ER, I don't... Thank you. So we show on our schedule here that we're going to be closing at 5 p.m. Oh, sorry, Tina, I'm out of money. You came up 3 times. You got 3 checks. Somebody give her a mic. Hey, I'm sorry, there's no mic. You can... Where'd the mic go? Oh.
Sorry, Minister, you wanted to close for the evening, but my question deals with the state master plans that are being formulated right now. How would they factor into the overall scheme of the development plan?
That's a very good question, and we are considering that. There is an initiative that Delegate Otobe, I believe it's also held up in the Senate, the Title 31 proposal. Yeah. I'm not sure who's the chairman of that committee. But there is a thinking already in considering the work that's being done in the Senate and the House, amending Title 31 to create a planning system. And this is where we see an integration with the national government to the state level. The proposal, I believe, in my discussions with the delegate, are the creation of a regional planning, maybe coordination committee, and then master plan or planning offices within each state government. So that is the expectation as how it integrates with the state level. Thank you. I hope that answers your question. Greg, do you have a question for me? No. Okay, thank you. So if you don't mind, I'll give you, oh no, Jennifer. Jennifer Goskelin wants the mic. Somebody give her a mic.
Eruba ka Jennifer Gibbons sakti OIs.
Goskelin Gibbons, sorry.
Dia kakpain so kaldi oger lel torbela we ada momdenge kusa da Google toam rigen. El al time at tel tora tourism el sao ringi akora di compare gidan mortigal baby ra adra ayun sra Pacific. Di gede kal competitor set terki. Di gede kal ndakadol hour okyagal direct lo sikro lele mora Fiji. Kadol hour okyagal mora abe kabebi ra kakarusel volumen. So kalmam dengel wase ngaring ya partner tel bolo mesaigel trial moral competitors terki. So the quick English question is there a way to look at the tourism sector more from a Palau point of view rather than a Pacific point of view? Because our competitor and our brand stands for and competes with countries that are not the Pacific. We compete with Seychelles, Bali, and other destinations which would be more valuable to us in terms of understanding what carriers would matter, how do we compete in that space. Yeah, and I just hope that that becomes more of an open conversations. There's a lot of very good talent in Palau to address that.
Thank you, Mrs. Gibbons.
Sulang.
No, it's a point that you know she brings up that's really important, and I had in my mind when listening to the Horwath presentation because they did highlight Fiji quite frequently and direct comparison with Palau, and I think it's a similar argument on a more general level when people compares Palau's development status to, say, the Republic of the Marshall Islands. It's not really where we want to be going, so I don't know why we're comparing ourselves. I think it's important to set the right benchmarks. So Jennifer's point is a little bit different, but I think that's something that when we're doing our planning, we should have the examples of the aspirations. For example, our president often mentions we need to develop our quality of life here so that people will stay, and he describes that quality of life as through income, and he says our income needs to be as high as what Guam and Hawaii have to offer. So I think that's an important point for the planning. I'm making this a planning question, or answering it in a planning way, that we need to set our benchmarks and our targets, and that also needs to be reflected in comparables. And Fiji may not be comparable, partly because is the ambassador here, Ambassador Turner? It may not be likely that we get a lot of tourists from Australia and New Zealand. It's just really far away, especially if we don't expand our runway where we can have a direct flight. I think maybe more likely in my discussions with several other consultants this week that we get expats from Papua New Guinea, Port Moresby, who may fly over, and that might be more likely in terms of the kind of guest we get. Likewise, a flight from Singapore would give us a different customer segment that would really diversify. I've heard someone say that Indians of all groups are getting into diving. I guess it reflects their higher income in that country and their economic prosperity. They might become a group that Sam's Tours might want to consider targeting directly through hopefully a flight by Tiger Air or Singapore Air direct from Singapore to Palau. So I think these are opportunities that we need to look at. In that particular example, another person was commenting, why would they want to come here when they can go to Seychelles or Maldives and other places that are much closer to home? But I think location is location, and Palau's diving may be different than those other destinations. So important to consider these things in our planning exercise, look at the benchmarks, look at our comparative advantage, and plan on how we can target. And if we target right, we can put enough resources to make those plans able to be actualized. So thank you, Jennifer, or Mrs. Gibbons, for your question. Well, since there are no other questions, unless Ian wants to ask me one about tax reform, let me go ahead and close. A few statements. I won't stay up here that long. One, maybe housekeeping. There were a lot of slides that we had up here, and we did make use of a lot of recordings. Unfortunately, this facility doesn't have the greatest of internet access. So we had asked our presenters to record, and those were provided to us. Advantage of that is we can make those available to you if you're interested. Vice President of the Senate had asked if we could get a copy of Chairman Galbraith's presentation so he can share with the other senators, and I'm sure the House would like a copy, and they can share that with the other delegates that were unable to make it today. This is televised, as I said, recorded, so it will be televised online, if that goes together, probably on YouTube, starting tomorrow. That's the plan. So anyone can have access to this, but if there are any particular presentations requested, please let us know. Otherwise, these slides, we will also make those available. I have to ask my staff what they plan to do, but most likely will be put on our website, palaugov.org, and you can access a lot of information, statistics there, if you haven't already visited our website. I was also asked, what's next? The typical outcome of a symposium is a communique. For this particular one, we may issue a statement that will briefly try to integrate all of the information that was presented today and some of the discussions and present a way forward that could be actioned. And that was the original intent of the Economic Symposium when we launched it in the mid-2010s. I think it's been a very valuable exercise, and Mrs. Gibbons and I worked closely to start this out, and I think it's been a very good exercise. We looked at previous information on the symposium back in 2012, and those represent a lot of the reforms that are being implemented today. So I think it's very meaningful, and I think it shows success in and of itself. So we do want to make sure we share this experience with others, and we're happy to work very closely with the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Sam, for being here. We look forward to more engagement with the Chamber of Commerce, especially now that we're doing the national planning. And we hope to be successful in helping build the private sector that we're looking for. So this year was a different format. I don't know if you've noticed, if you've been to our other economic symposiums. Typically, we do a little bit more of a panel exercise. So we have shorter speeches, and we have people who do more reflection on these presentations. They tend to reduce the presentation length. So I think we have less information, but we have a little bit more engagement. It doesn't always offer opportunity for question and answer. So I thought this format this year went pretty well, but I am interested in any feedback you can give me. I want to thank the presenters and supporters for what I thought was a very great information that was provided today. I think it's very relevant and useful, and I think they were very generous in their time, especially being in country, which is something we've already started taking for granted. But thank you all for coming. It's great to know that we have friends who are willing to help us in the recovery. I think there was a theme that came out of this, and I think it's important to look at what exactly is the message that we can take home with us. I'll venture to suggest one. I think the future can be different based on us, and I think maybe the only future that we can count on will be one that's based on our commitment and our actions to change things. And I think you'll see that in some of the, one thing that's different this year was a presentation of the social protection project. You heard them make a point that in the end, it's about the people. So we got to make sure, even in the other presentations, make sure you take care of those people who are going to be more vulnerable to the impacts that we're expecting becoming. But how do you do that? And I think support with our friends like Japan, like Ireland, the Asian Development Bank, who facilitates all of this, really help us find a way to help these people that you saw some pictures today, and the way they're being helped is a very local way, and I thought it was very touching. So yeah, it's up to us. We will collectively make the future happen, the future that we want. So I want to thank you all for participating in this year's symposium. I hope you've all found it useful for your purposes and learned a little bit more of our country for our guests who are visiting. I hope this is not the last time. As you've heard, we have a few hotel rooms open. You're welcome to come back and occupy some of them. The Rock Islands are quite empty, so private beach, who wouldn't want that? We do have several people who are in country, like Ian. Jason often visits, I won't count him. Of course, Mrs. Gibbons is always available to help play tour guide. So, please visit us as many times as you feel is necessary, and you're always welcome. Thank you, and we hope you join us for next year's symposium. Thank you.